This semester in anthropology, I've learned a lot about the world I live in and the people and cultures that I share a planet with. One thing, however, made a lasting impression and really changed my perspective on things. Anthropology changed my mind about how I view families. Before this class, if you had asked me who my family was, you would have gotten a pretty simple answer. There's my mom and dad, my older brother, my older sister, and me. If I was feeling talkative, I could go into even more detail about my extended family. I've got 3 sets of grandparents, 4 uncles and aunts on my father's side, as well as my mother's 2 brothers and their wife and husband. Add in a slew of cousins, some great aunts and uncles, and you have a pretty basic overview of my family. For a long time, I thought that everyone had the same sort of family that I did. Sure, some people have 2 dads, or 2 moms, or only 1 mom or dad, or are even raised by other close family members. But the basis of it seemed pretty similar to me. Your siblings are your family, your parents are your family, your cousins are your family, and so on and so forth. When I started anthropology, though, I realized that the type of family I was used to isn't the only kind of family that there is. It may seem obvious now, but before it's pointed out to you, it isn't really something that you think about. Anthropology has 6 basic kinship systems, but the 2 that are presented most often are the Iroquois and Eskimo kinship systems. The Iroquois operate in unilineal systems. That means that descent is traced through only one of your parents, either your mother or your father. As a result, you use different terms for relatives on your mother's side than you would for relatives on your father's side. Also, there's a merge that occurs with your mother and your mother's sister. You refer to both of them as your mother, instead of as your mother and your aunt. The same goes for your father and any of his brothers. They aren't referred to as your uncles, they're referred to as your father as well. The Eskimo kinship system looks more familiar to us because it's the same system that most cultures in Europe and America use, which is bilineal descent. Bilineal descent means that a child is related by descent to both parents, instead of only one as the Iroquois are. In bilineal descent systems, there are unique terms for relatives within the nuclear family. Your mother, your father, your sister, or your brother, and you use the same terms for relatives on your mother's side as you do for relatives on your father's side. But defining a family gets even more complicated once you start to separate things like descent lines, where a couple lives once they're married, whether people live with their nuclear family or their extended family, and the sticky subject of inheritance once a parent or a grandparent passes away. These things tend to vary by mode of production. For example, foraging cultures are more likely to have a bilineal descent line than pastoralists, who operate commonly under a unilineal system. Many places also recognize kinship ties that are based on acts of sharing and support. To these cultures, kinship affects more than just who you call your relatives. It affects things like who you can and cannot marry, who you share your food and housing with, and even who you allow to care for your children. Among the Maasai tribe in East Africa, it isn't uncommon for a woman with many children to give one to a friend or neighbor who has no children to care for. Many of these things have helped me realize that even though family might seem like a simple subject, it has plenty of details and intricacies hiding just below the surface. Family can be 2 parents, or 1 parent, or a whole lot of parents. It can be living with just your mom and dad, and it can be living with 3 or 4 generations under one roof. Family can even be a group of friends brought together by a common love for a sports team or even a movie. The bottom line is that families are as diverse as culture itself, and perhaps even more so.